This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
Tonight, unsettling start. A shooting near a Halifax school leaves students and parents shaken on the first day of classes.
Washed up, another tidal energy company tries and fails to harness the powerful tides of the Bay of Fundy.
And lighting the way. A group of volunteers rallies to restore a piece of history on Briar Island.
High pressure moving out, the clouds moving in throughout the day on Friday ahead of a wet and windy system, which is set for Saturday. Your full forecast is coming up.
Good evening. It was an unsettling start to the school year for parents and kids in North End Halifax, where police were on the scene of a shooting this morning. It happened just as families were getting ready around 7:30.
The incident led to hold and secure procedures being put in place at the two schools in the neighborhood. Gareth Hampshire has the story.
This was the alarming scene children and their parents walked by on their way to school in Halifax's North End. Police found a man with gunshot wounds on Rosemead Avenue, which is between St. Stephen's Elementary and Highland Park Junior High School. Parents got emails advising them to keep their kids home if they'd not left yet. It was disappointing for children who were looking forward to the new school year.
I put on my clothes and everything, and then my mom was like, we can't go, and I was like, what? And then she told me that there was an accident, and I was so scared.
We received an email, and they were telling us that we have to wait at home till they send another notification. Then I was searching in Facebook or maybe in the news because I wanted to know what happened. I was worried for my girl.
Seeing such a police presence was distressing for parents who did not know the details of what was happening.
Just now we got to know the incident, what happened, and we are getting scared. Why? Because my kids are very small, they don't know what is going on. Yeah. So it's better to tell them, but they'll be scary, right, if we say.
Once we see this all police and some situation here, we just scary. It's just scary to us.
The hold and secure was lifted after 9 a.m., allowing the kids to finally get the year started.
When they said that we can't go out and go back to school, I was very excited.
The police took down the yellow tape and left the area, but there was still some anxiety among parents picking up their kids at the end of the school day.
Well, a little unease because, this is the first day of school. There's a lot of kids going to be around, and, something popped off like this. Usually we don't get something this magnitude right by a school area, right? So it kind of hit home.
The police news release says the shooting happened after two men who know each other got into a dispute, resulting in one being shot. He was taken to hospital, and police say he will survive. Still, walking by a crime scene was upsetting for families who say they hope they don't see anything like it again in the neighborhood. Gareth Hampshire, CBC News, Halifax.
The RCMP are investigating what they are describing as two suspicious deaths in Windsor. On Tuesday evening, police did a well-being check on two people at a home on King Street. Officers found two dead men inside the residence. The men were 73 and 40 years of age and were known to each other. And while police are calling the deaths suspicious, they do not believe there is any risk to the public.
Nova Scotia's health minister confirmed a quality review is underway in the case of a Truro child who almost died last month. Jennifer Weatherby says she took her 13-year-old son Paxton to the Truro walk-in clinic and twice to the Colchester East Hants Health Centre. On the last visit to the emergency department, Paxton was diagnosed with cluster migraines and sent home, even though he could barely walk or talk. Weatherby decided to take him to the IWK that night, and soon after he was in brain surgery. It turned out he had a bacterial infection that spread to his brain. Minister Michelle Thompson says at this point she's comfortable leaving it with the health authority.
I don't have the insight into the case at all, and so I think the quality review is the right approach, making sure that those folks review the case and understand what happened and how those recommendations can improve the system and be accountable as well for the situation.
Quality reviews are done internally and typically shared with family members. However, they are not made public.
Another company that hoped to harness the powerful tides of the Bay of Fundy to generate electricity has come up short. A spokesperson for the Nova Scotia government confirmed yesterday that Current Power, formerly Big Moon Power, has filed for bankruptcy. Michael Gorman reports.
There isn't much to see here at high tide in Walton, but the plan was for there to soon be devices to create electricity with hydropower. But that plan hit a snag when the company that developed this device, Current Power, filed for bankruptcy. Nova Scotia's Natural Resources Minister says the failure of another tidal venture is disappointing.
This is a sector that we want to see built out in Nova Scotia.
Another complication was that Current was supposed to remove this turbine that was left on the ocean floor 6 years ago by another failed company. These rail cars filled with concrete are now in the water too. They were supposed to be moorings for the Current devices when they launched. Fishermen are concerned about the growing amount of debris left behind by busted tidal outfits.
They're a navigational issue, and they need to be moved. We can't keep leaving this. We can't keep running an industry, that leaves junk, laying around and for the people of the Minas Basin to have to deal with.
The minister says the province holds security to cover cleanup costs, but he's not sure if it's still enough, and he says it's too soon to know when it might happen.
It will be a process to move forward. Now that we don't have the company that's leading the charge on that, we do. It's new news to us as a department, so we have to evaluate how we're going to approach this.
For now, the views here in the Minas Basin remain unchanged. Michael Gorman, CBC News at Province House.
We have been enjoying a lovely week of weather, but there's a but, isn't there?
Yes, well, I understand tomorrow good, but then all good things do come to an end.
The timing, right? Lovely week. Sunshine, warm temperatures, a great start to September, but yes, just in time for the weekend. We do indeed have some wet and windy weather on the way. Tom and Amy, thank you so much. As we have a look at the satellite picture, and you can see all quiet right now, but we will see the clouds rolling in as we work throughout the day on Friday, and this system here, and this is an interesting one indeed, a bit of a hybrid weather system in that it does have some tropical characteristics, but also kind of like a regular fall storm that would blow through the region. However, should this develop more tropical characteristics throughout the day on Friday, it does have an outside chance of being named Francine, and so we'll be keeping an eye on that. Right now, looks like about a 30% chance that it would get that name if it develops more tropical characteristics. Again, 30% chance of it becoming Francine. Whether it does, whether it doesn't, it does look set to bring for us, yes, the clouds throughout the day on Friday and some wet weather beginning Friday night with periods of rain and the winds ramping up as well. Looks like the wettest time frame will be through the wee morning hours of Saturday, then throughout Saturday morning, lingering into the afternoon, especially for eastern areas. And this is when I think the winds will really ramp up as well. Right now, it kind of looks like a widespread 30 to 50 millimeters of rainfall with pockets of 50 to maybe 75. Can't even rule out a little bit more locally in the heaviest downpours and thunderstorms, again, with those tropical downpours that are going to be coming in with this system. One quick note on the winds as well, ramping up through Saturday, especially along the Atlantic coastline, eastern parts of the mainland. Looks like we'll see kind of widespread 50 to 70 kilometer per hour gusts, but could see some gusts pushing into the 80 to even 90 kilometer per hour range, which is warning criteria, particularly for eastern areas through the later stages of Saturday. So not one to write home about, but certainly one to take note of as we move through the next couple of days. We'll be keeping you posted on that. More on this with your 7-day forecast still to come.
Looking forward to that. Thanks so much, Ryan.
Thank you.
Atlantic Canada has some of the best air quality in the country, but climate change is altering that. And new research led by Dalhousie University is trying to help people and institutions respond. Maura Donovan brings us that story.
When wildfires rage, blanketing communities in smoke, or a heat wave arrives, you can feel it in your chest. But what exactly is happening to your lungs? There's little research here in the Maritimes about lung health and climate change. This respiratory epidemiologist wants to change that.
Because everybody breathes and everybody might not notice it, but you notice it when you can't. And so I think that as people become more aware, it's going to be more important for scientists and the community to ensure that people have access to timely and accurate information.
Research from elsewhere in the country shows the consequences can be severe. Wildfires produce tiny particles called PM2.5 that affect lung development and increase rates of lung disease. This can be especially dangerous for people with pre-existing lung conditions.
The breathing in of particulates, especially when that might be exacerbated in a time of a wildfire or exacerbated by extreme heats, causes more inflammation and causes a bigger response.
It's why Stanievich is leading a project to set up sensors like those already in use in the Northwest Territories. The goal is to better monitor air quality at the local level. More generalized data is already available. There's the National Air Quality Health Index, and the Nova Scotia government funds monitors in several places across the province.
But they don't always reflect what an individual may experience. And so we have monitors in downtown Halifax, but that may, an individual's exposure in various parts of the city may be quite different.
A New Brunswick organization has also worked on an interactive map that provides near real-time information about local air quality. Melanie Langell is the CEO of NB Lung.
Our wildfire seasons are getting longer and more intense and more widespread. So there is a real need to understand that PM 2.5 component of air quality, which is the main component in wildfire smoke, to understand that more on a community by community basis.
Stanievich says the plan is to work on a similar map to give Nova Scotians the data they need to manage a changing climate and their health.
So it might be choosing to invest in an indoor air quality filter, or just to modify their behaviors and go out at different times of the day to avoid exposures to some of the peaks in when the air quality is the worst and might exacerbate their symptoms.
The sensors are expected to start returning preliminary results in the next year. Maura Donovan, CBC News, Halifax.
Our provincial representatives are back at Province House. Today was the start of the fall sitting, one normally focused on bringing in new laws or amending existing ones. As Jean Laroche reports, it's an early start to what may be a short sitting.
The first order of business is choosing a new speaker. Carla McFarland's sudden resignation last fall created the vacancy. Each of the three parties nominates one of their own.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I nominate the member for Chester St. Margaret's as the Speaker of this House of Assembly.
The result? No surprise.
Proceeded to the choice of the Speaker and has elected Danielle Barkos.
The PC majority guaranteed the Premier's choice would win. Danielle Barkhouse is only the second woman to hold the job.
Take it easy on me. It's my first day, if you didn't know.
This return to Province House is weeks ahead of what's normal. Although the Premier won't detail the PC agenda, expect a relatively quick sitting.
The opposition will decide how long we're here. We're just here to do the work and make a positive impact on the lives of Nova Scotians. That's what our focus is. The opposition will decide how long they want to be here.
The opposition leaders say however long they're here, their focus will be on the housing crisis and on the high cost of living.
We've got working families that are struggling to make ends meet. We've got fixed income seniors, young people. Everybody's dealing with the same cost of living crisis, and it's impacting people in very real ways, and we've got practical ideas that can help.
We are firmly trying to make clear to this government that affordability is the main issue we're hearing about, and housing is the main driver of those affordability issues.
Today's business included changes to the Labor Standards Code to give people who are seriously ill up to 6-month unpaid leave and adding 5 more days to the minimum number of sick days employees can use when they're unwell. Jean Laroche, CBC News at Province House.
It has been a year since the Halifax Regional Municipality changed the rules for short-term rentals in the city. It restricted how STRs can operate in residential neighborhoods with the hope of making more long-term housing available to alleviate the housing crisis. But Mike Petrosniak of the Short-Term Rental Association of Nova Scotia says finding hard data to support that outcome is difficult.
We really do need to track that. What are the gains? What are the gains and what are the losses? And so for HRM to not have tracked that, it's a bit of a missed opportunity. I know that the ratio for sure is not 1-to-1 in terms of for every short-term rental that's shut down, you don't get a long-term rental out of it. What that ratio is, I'm not sure. I wish I had better numbers for you, but that is something that we really need to be tracking in order to make sort of informed decisions here.
I'll talk to the association about what they think is happening with former short-term rental properties in HRM. That's our Newsmaker interview just after 6:30.
The Cogswell redevelopment in downtown Halifax is on schedule and should come in under budget. The former maze of ramps and walls dividing the north end from downtown Halifax have all come down. Staff say they are about 2/3 of the way through the project, which will create the base for a 6.5-hectare neighborhood. Councillors approved an extra $15 million this week to cover unexpected costs, like disposing of unsuitable soils and breaking trench rock. The cost of the new interactive fountain has also gone up slightly, but staff say cost-sharing deals with utilities like Halifax Water for work on the project will cover those overruns and then some. It actually lowers the budget by nearly $10 million, leaving a final cost of $113 million.
For you to come back and for us to see that, in fact, the net cost of this project has dropped by a substantial amount, and the amount of debt we'll have to take on while we're waiting to sell the lots has dropped. That is a really good news story for the city.
Barrington Street is on track to open this December with a new transit hub in place. The entire project is expected to be done next December, with final landscaping taking place in the spring of 2026.
And one other HRM note to make tonight. Last night, we reported that former Halifax CAO Jacques Dubé did not participate in the report on the homeless encampment evictions 3 years ago. In fact, we learned today that he did take part in that report. To Briar Island now, where a group of volunteers is hoping to start restoration on a historic lighthouse situated on a small piece of land off the shore of Westport. Molly McNaughton has more.
In the passage between Long Island and Briar Island, Peters Island Light was built in the early 1900s and is protected under the Heritage Lighthouse Protection Act. Now decommissioned and falling apart, locals are trying to save it.
I think perhaps it's the heritage and the history that we have to cling to because they are important. We can't, as a country, let our heritage go.
Moore, who's lived in Westport all her life, helped form the group Save an Island Lighthouse in 2015. Since then, volunteers have been busy fundraising money to help with repairs.
These are the magnets that we're selling, and all the proceeds go to the sale too.
Islander Kelly Albright runs the Ice House gift shop in the village. She sells lighthouse magnets in the store. All the proceeds go to the group.
I just think it's a great idea because we got to preserve our history and bring our lighthouses back.
But it's not been an easy process. A structural engineer came to do a study and found that the lantern was in dire need of repair. Mike McKinnell, another member of the group, says once a contractor and boat are secured, it will take at least a month for a crew to fix up the lantern, if they can secure transportation. The island is owned by the Nova Scotia Nature Trust, who initially didn't want the group to work on the land.
They didn't want us to disturb the gulls during nesting season, so we're well aware of that, and people don't really set foot on the island.
This year, the group received approval from the Canadian Wildlife Service to start construction.
They've allowed us to do work with restrictions that we don't disturb the gull population or the cormorants.
So far, they've raised over $20,000. The municipality of Digby, who owns all 3 lighthouses on the island, was granted $225,000 from the federal government. The group hopes that the municipality will help contribute 1/3 of the cost to the project when it's finalized.
Well, the money that we've been granted by the government has to last forever to preserve the lighthouses, so we really can't afford to spend much more than about, I'd say all told, $80,000 to $100,000 on this project.
Moore and McKinnell say they hope to start construction on Peters Island before hurricane season. From there, they hope to fix the exterior and restore it to its former state. Molly McNaughton, CBC News, Briar Island.
A local fashion designer who works under the banner of Lemonade Stand Designs has had a steadily rising profile in Halifax over the last 15 years.
Now, this summer has been a busy, sometimes tiring one for her and a team assembled to reach one of the world's biggest fashion events. The CBC's David Irish explains.
It's our last production meeting.
This past May, Marie Webb began a residency at the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, fulfilling a dream of hers to be a part of that community.
So what do you think about NASCAD?
NASCAD is in the beginning.
It's the beginning?
In the beginning, yes.
In the beginning.
The residency is just one star of many that has recently aligned for Webb, who has Down syndrome. Years of mentorships with other artists, arranged by her mother, Renee Forrestal, has honed her craft and forged connections in the community.
This one was done with Aya Okamura, who's what Marie had done a project with before the pandemic. And they did a whole, Aya mentored Marie and taught her all about kimono building, because she's from Japan. She was like a kimono builder for the monks in Japan. I know, like Buddhist monks.
And her health has stabilized after being diagnosed in 2017 with a serious illness that led to a month-long stay in hospital.
The prognosis could be anywhere from 5 to 7 to 10 years. And we didn't know at the time if we were even coming out of the hospital.
Then a kinship forged with the creative director of a local production company.
I met them at their studio in Maynard Street. I walked in and it was just color and just pure talent. So I was like, okay, these are my people, and just the warmth around them. And then the fact that for the brand Lemonade Stand, it was about inclusivity. And I told Renee, next year's your year. We're heading to New York for Fashion Week. And she's like, okay, let's do it.
12 of Webb's designs, created head to toe from scratch, will be worn by models from Nova Scotia. Lisa Hamilton helped arrange the residency and handpicked Webb's team to take her designs from paper to final fabrics.
She is very prolific. So when Marie comes into the studio, she illustrates and illustrates and illustrates. She is creating amazing illustrations, one after the other, after the other. She's not shy with putting her work out. She's confident in her work.
They are so colorful. They are so, like, I was thinking, oh, Mary is such a talented person.
My favorite part has been like dissecting these images with a group of other sewers who would approach something differently than I would, and I wouldn't even think about it.
She has so many like complicated, big, and like different designs that we didn't know how to make them.
Our job is not to interpret them as freely as I would like to, but to interpret them for exactly what they are, which is challenging because we only can see the front. We can't see the side and we can't see the back.
For one design, it would take like hours to decide what are we gonna make.
I love being handed a problem and then being like, okay, here are the materials, go crazy. So it was really fun. I had a great time with this and I've learned a lot. I've never used this boning material before.
Seeing the designs come to life this way has been a special experience for the 34-year-old artist.
They come alive.
Did it feel good?
I feel perfect.
The residency has not only been an opportunity for Webb. The learning has worked in two directions.
It's quite groundbreaking, and that she is and will be very inspiring for our student body. She's creating work in the way our students are interested in creating work, and she's letting us know that it is all possible.
Our team has been amazing. Good job.
I think what we're seeing and what we're responding to is the immediacy and the authentic quality of her lines, that they are not self-conscious. And Marie, when she draws, it's so free of...
My drawings are magic.
They're magic.
Yeah, my soul.
There you go, it's magic. There you go.
Webb's designs will be showcased in New York starting September 7th. Perfect. Yeah. David Irish, CBC News, Halifax.
Magic designs.
Magic.
That's a great way to put
Perfect.
it. Yeah, beautiful colors there. Thanks very much for that. All right, first quick break on the way. Stay with us.
There is a lot more to come on CBC Nova Scotia News. Political fallout. The demise of the NDP Liberal deal starts the clock on a potential federal election.
And Health Canada has directed provinces to destroy their COVID-19 vaccine supplies and wait for new shots.
And that's a familiar place. The Public Gardens. Ryan is up next with full weather forecast. We'll see you after the break.
All right, at times like this, it's important to remember that Ryan doesn't make the weather. He just reports on the weather, and he's not ruining our weekend.
But tomorrow sounds great.
In the meantime.
Right?
Yeah.
Glass
Thank
half
you
full?
for that. Thank you for
wanted
that.
to be such a nice weekend.
Yeah, it's true. Listen, we're going to look at it this way. Everybody's back to work, back to school. We're going to need Saturday.
Downtime.
Get some rest.
Downtime,
Okay.
relax. Sure. Yeah, for sure.
Positive spin, I like
Glass
it.
half full meteorology all the time here in the Weather Center. Yeah, let's take a look. I mean, it's beautiful out there right now.
Sure
and a
is.
lovely evening in downtown Halifax, Pier 21. And yeah, a couple of boats out there on the harbor. Does look pretty nice.
It does.
Pretty nice indeed. Now, we've got temperatures out there, 20 degrees in Halifax, still 25 in the valley, 26 at the Caribou Point Station in Pictou County. And yeah, we've got temperatures of 25 degrees right now in Ganesh Beach and in Kentville. So let's have a look at the satellite radar picture. We'll circle back, in case you're just joining us, to this system that we are going to be keeping an eye on pretty closely over the next 24 hours. That's really where we'll still have the window for further tropical development with this system. As I mentioned earlier, there are some tropical characteristics to it already, but not enough for the National Hurricane Center to give it a name, and that, again, would be Francine if it does indeed gather and develop more tropical characteristics. Right now, just a 30% chance of that happening. Now, as I said earlier, whether it does develop tropical characteristics, more tropical characteristics or not, it looks like for us, the impacts are going to be largely the same. If it does become more tropical, certainly there'll be the potential for some heavier downpours, the potential for some gustier winds, but overall, this is going to be, I think, an impactful event, but not one that we'll be remembering in a week or so as it blows through pretty quickly. Now, we will be looking at special weather statements in effect right now, kind of widespread 30 to 50 millimeters is the call here. The rainfall warning in through the south and west right now. This is where we'll get into those heavier rains a little earlier through the Friday night time period, but I wouldn't be surprised if those rainfall warnings are expanded as we move into tomorrow, especially once the forecast model guidance hones in on where exactly we'll see the potential for those heavier pockets. Again, widespread 30 to 50, but I think the potential for 50 to 75, maybe even a little bit more locally by the time we get to the end of Saturday, given the heavier downpours and tropical downpours and the potential for thunderstorms with this system. Winds are light tonight. Tomorrow, another beautiful day, as we said. Cape Breton, increasing clouds, but the sun will hang on longer for northern and eastern areas of the province, with the clouds building in pretty quickly for tomorrow morning in through the south and west. And note the southeast winds tomorrow. Those are going to keep temps cooler into the teens along the Atlantic coastline. We'll be high teens along the coastline again on Saturday, but most of us should at least bump up to around 20 degrees on Saturday. The bulk of that wet weather, as we said, is likely going to be in the morning. This is where we'll have the greatest potential for those downpours and the risk of a rumble of thunder. By the time we get to Saturday evening, still hanging on for a couple of rain bands for Cape Breton and the eastern mainland, but the bulk of this system will have moved off to the north. Sunday, a quieter day, isolated shower chances. Looks like the heavier rain will be following that system up, will be staying offshore. The winds, again, gusty, beginning Saturday morning, widespread 50, 60 kilometer per hour gusts, potential for 70, 80, especially eastern mainland and into Cape Breton. So we'll be keeping you posted on that as well. Potential for a few outages, given the trees are still in full leaf. And then Monday, back to the sunshine, just in time for the work week. Tom and Amy.
More good news.
Good work.
Okay, thanks so much, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
And up next, I'll talk with the Short-Term Rentals Association of Nova Scotia 1 year after HRM imposed new restrictions to see what has changed in the rental housing market. That's our Newsmaker interview.
Do stay with us. You're watching CBC Nova Scotia News.
It has been a year since the Halifax Regional Municipality changed the rules for short-term rentals in the city. It restricted how STRs can operate in residential neighborhoods with the hope of making more long-term housing available to alleviate the housing crisis. Mike Petrosoniak is with the group Short-Term Rental Association of Nova Scotia. We are a year into HRM restrictions of short-term rentals, and we've been looking around for numbers to suggest the impact those changes might be having, but we're having a hard time finding evidence. What are you seeing?
Well, yeah, I guess there's kind of two parts to that that question, Tom. One question would be on what have we lost through this bylaw, and one would be on what have we gained. The what have we lost, that side, it's hard to tell. Initially, we had calculated about $50 million worth of losses in revenue to the province, and that's from sort of tourist revenue. And we don't have any updated data on that side, and we don't have anything updated from HRM to us either in terms of what was actually lost there. But looking at the what have we gained side of things, I mean, the housing crisis unfortunately has not improved since sort of this ban on small scale, locally owned short-term rentals. We've seen the housing crisis continue essentially from my perspective, what seems unabated. One bedroom rentals are up 10%, the cost of what they were last year. The cost to rent a two-bedroom is up 18.2%, and the level of homelessness in the city as well is up 40%. So I think banning short-term rentals within HRM really caused only sort of a small blip in any increase in available long-term units.
There could be any number of things, I suppose, impacting the cost of a rental unit right now. Anything from immigration to pick your reason. But in terms of the number of units reverting from short-term to long-term, what are you seeing there?
It depends on the unit. I mean, if it's a standalone and it's a house in sort of an urban area, then yeah, I mean, it may switch over from a short-term rental to a long-term rental. But I can tell you definitely the basement apartment type owners that we're talking to, most of those, I don't have a number for you, but anecdotally, most of those are not going to switch over. I mean, these are people that have set up specifically their basement to attract visitors and that sort of thing, and they were, excited about that opportunity. And then when that was shut down, they've said, like, I also use this space for storage. I also use this space for my relatives when they're visiting. So no, I'm not going to rent out my basement apartment on the long-term market.
We asked HRM for data, and HRM says staff aren't tracking how many units are converted to long-term permanent housing through STR regulation enforcement, as we, quote, are not yet in a position to do so. Could it just be that this needs a little more time to come up with the evidence?
Well, we are a year later. I mean, they should have been, if they're going to implement something that affects the lives of the incomes of that many again, small scale, locally owned type operations, then we really do need to track that. What are the gains? What are the gains and what are the losses? And so for HRM to not have tracked that, it's a bit of a missed opportunity. I know that the ratio for sure is not 1-to-1 in terms of for every short-term rental that's shut down, you don't get a long-term rental out of it. What that ratio is, I'm not sure. I wish I had better numbers for you, but that is something that we really need to be tracking in order to make sort of informed decisions here.
The July 2024 StatCan report estimates about 800 short-term rentals in Halifax that could potentially be turned back into long-term dwellings. They calculate this based on listings that comprise entire units listed for more than 180 days a year, excluding those vacation-type properties. That would help a lot of families, no?
Yeah, I think what we need to look at too here is what. How much is that helping the housing crisis that we have? I mean, as a province, I've heard from our governing party that we're planning to add another 1 million people to the province by 2060. That's 27,000 people a year. Most of that coming to HRM. If we picture about 2.3 people per household, that's 10,000 units that we're going to need every year. So. And that's new every year. So that 800 is going to fill up. If that 800 does end up being that number, that would essentially only solve our problem for what 1 to 2 months worth of immigration. I mean, I think right now, small-scale, locally owned short-term rentals are being used as a scapegoat for the housing crisis that's happening, and we're not really looking at sort of the bigger picture of what's causing some of our housing issues.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. We're out of time, but Mike Petrosoniak, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tom. Anytime.
Coming up, Ottawa's struggle to make school bus fleets across the country electric.
Welcome back. Jagmeet Singh made a campaign-style appearance in Toronto today. It came a day after the NDP leader announced the end of a power-sharing deal with the Liberals.
But he wouldn't say what it would take for him to bring down the Trudeau government and force an election. As Ashley Burke reports, Singh is trying out a new strategy to try and win voter support.
A day after Jagmeet Singh's big breakup with the Liberals, he's campaigning to replace Justin Trudeau.
And when the next election comes, my friends, I am running to be the next Prime Minister of this country.
This polling aggregate shows the Conservatives have surged in support, and if there were an election today, could win 42% of the popular vote. That's at the expense of the Liberals, which have been trailing behind all year, and the NDP hasn't benefited. It's sitting in third place.
When folks are upset with the red team, they then start looking at the blue team.
Singh came out swinging against the blue team, trying to distance himself from the Liberals and position himself as the alternative to Pierre Poilievre.
Let me be clear. Conservative cuts would take things from bad to worse.
Singh stayed on his message track, repeating it more than a dozen times.
We have ripped up the agreement with Justin Trudeau. We have absolutely ripped up the agreement with Justin Trudeau, and that means an election is more likely. We have ripped up the agreement with Justin Trudeau. The agreement is done.
But despite repeated questions, wouldn't say if he would bring down the government.
I will look at any vote that comes before us, and we will make a decision in the best interest of Canadians, as any minority government normally operates.
And people know that. They remember what Conservatives do.
This is all unfolding during two fierce by-election campaigns.
And who is ready to elect common sense Conservative Colin Reynolds in Elmwood, Transcona?
The NDP's trying to hold on to a seat in Manitoba and pick up another in Montreal. Now the party's in the spotlight.
And it allows them to go to voters in those ridings in particular and say, look, we aren't propping up the unpopular Liberals. You can vote for us and get something different.
The move puts the Liberals on shakier ground.
Hopefully the NDP will continue to try and deliver for Canadians. Right now they're focused on politics. We're focused on Canadians.
Singh says he's ready for an election, but if he plans on triggering one, he won't say when. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
In the U.S., investigators looking into yesterday's school shooting in Georgia are reviewing tips from more than a year ago about threatening online posts that alluded to a school attack. At that time, a 13-year-old boy was interviewed, but investigators say there was not enough evidence for an arrest. Now, a 14-year-old student at the school is expected to be charged with murder in the deaths of 2 teachers and 2 students. State officials want to try the alleged gunman as an adult. The weapon used in yesterday's attack is one familiar from other mass shootings, an AR-15.
Well, if you're hoping to get a COVID-19 vaccine this month, you might be out of luck. Several provinces say they've been asked to destroy their current stocks of vaccine. Mike Crawley reports on the directive from Health Canada and the confusion it's created.
At this Toronto pharmacy, here's the fridge where the COVID-19 vaccines used to be.
The Public Health Agency of Canada has issued a market withdrawal.
When pharmacist Fadi Salama got this memo last week telling him to destroy his existing vaccine supply, he wondered if it might be a scam.
It was confusing enough for me to not take it seriously at first, and then I kind of read through it a little bit more and it seemed legitimate.
It was indeed legitimate from Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health. But with no new supply of COVID vaccine expected for weeks, it's left Salama puzzled.
Why would we get rid of something that is still good?
Ontario blames Health Canada. The federal agency wants the existing vaccine supply withdrawn before it will distribute an updated version targeting the newest strains of COVID.
I don't think that at the national or at the provincial levels, they're trying to create a vacuum. I think this is a harbinger that the updated formulation is going to come soon.
Health Canada says provinces are allowed to use last year's vaccines until the transition to the new shots, but there's clearly confusion. Alberta and Saskatchewan have joined Ontario in scrapping their existing stocks. British Columbia is keeping its supply available. Marie-Andrée Lajoie plans to travel overseas next month. The appointment she'd booked for a COVID shot has now been cancelled.
I like to be vaccinated. I believe in that stuff. They want us to be vaccinated, and all of a sudden, poof,
No more vaccines.
Lajoie will now go get her shot in the U.S. Regulators there have already approved updated versions of 3 COVID vaccines. Here in Canada, they're all still under review. Officials expect they'll become available to Canadians in late September or early October. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
The Trudeau government announced billions in funding in 2021 to put 5,000 zero-emission buses on the road over 5 years. That included school buses, a common sight on Canadian streets. But 3 years in, less than 2% of the buses carrying kids back to school this fall are electric. Janice McGregor has more.
The first difference? How this bus sounds.
So the only thing you will hear are the wheels on the ground.
But CEO Marc Bédard's factory north of Montreal is also quieter than he'd like. After 700 layoffs forced, he says, by federal red tape.
We have a lot of operators that want to electrify their fleet right now, and today they are waiting for an approval. There's nothing worse than announcing a program and not deploying it.
Electric school buses save money over the long run, but initially they're double the cost. Bédard expected federal subsidies to help build about 500 of his buses each year, but approval for just the first 200 took 2.5 years.
Demand is growing, and it's growing fast.
Both federal and Quebec politicians championed Lion Electric's batteries in buses, and provincial policies plus a rebate put about 1,000 e-buses on Quebec roads. But elsewhere, slow federal approvals stalled plans. Take Prince Edward Island. Without money for 200 more electric buses, it had to buy 30 new diesel replacements.
You'll see all kinds of jurisdictions that are planning the switch to electric buses that are kind of in limbo while they wait for this funding.
One reason for the holdup? Competition from municipalities who want this money to buy buses for public transit.
We traditionally don't, in federal politics, develop programs designed for provincial education systems.
But environmentalists point out school buses are public transit too, and those stinky diesel fumes, they're toxic.
There are more diesel fumes inside the bus than outside the bus, so it's really having an impact on our kids, and we need to be prioritizing those buses.
Some kids spend more time on school buses than adults do on public transit, especially in rural Canada. But right now, the politics of electrifying urban transit may be winning out. Janice McGregor, CBC News, Ottawa.
All right, we have had some beautiful September days, that's for sure, but the evenings have been pretty nice too.
Lots of sunsets, lots of great photos folks have been sending into you.
Both day and night. And that segues nicely to this picture, which was sent in from Amherst Shore, again, in northern parts of Nova Scotia. And yeah, the northern lights have been on display a few times this summer. Diane Irwin, and again, a couple of planes captured flying through as well with this shot. So beautiful stuff. Thanks to Diane for sharing Ryan's pics at cbc.ca. So for tomorrow, it's going to be a great day. We've got increasing clouds, yes. Temperatures that are going to be along the coastline, likely around the high teens, but we'll squeak into the 20s for most of the province with that building cloud throughout the day. Wet weather tracking in overnight Friday, after midnight and into the Saturday time frame, and that's when it will be wet indeed. Periods of rain, some gusty winds, and we are going to be looking at the potential, at least, for some heavier downpours and thunderstorms. Those are looking likely. The potential for some localized flash flooding, given those heavy downpours and thunderstorms. Kind of a widespread 30 to 50 millimeters right now is looking most likely, with the heavier pockets and thunderstorms adding things up to perhaps as much as 70 or 80 millimeters locally. So we'll be keeping you posted on that. And again, the strong winds looking most likely for the eastern half of the mainland into Cape Breton. That's where we'll run the greatest risk of some gusts in the 60 and 70 kilometer per hour range, and maybe even 80 to 90 along parts of the coast. So keeping you posted on that. Stay tuned for updates on Friday.
For sure.
Will do. Okay, thanks so much for that, Ryan. Well, some black bears are attracted to bird feeders or the smell of household garbage, but a bear in Glovertown, Newfoundland has a nose for fresh laundry.
Yes, that's where a curious bear offered a helping paw. Alyssa Watkins had hung her clothes on the line to dry in her backyard.
The bear wandered into the garden and took some clothes off the line before deciding that was enough chores for the day. And no, it didn't do any folding.
Too bad.
Entertaining, that's for sure. That's it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Good night.
Good night.